Welcome to the final session, that is the last session of this week, that is where we are discussing about intellectual capital. Okay. Now, you remember we have been talking about lot of things related to intellectual capital, and I also told you the process through which you can measure and develop a index for intellectual capital considering three type of assets: tangible, intangible and invisible assets, which is a part of the capabilities of the individual as well as organization both. Similarly, we also talked about book value and market value and how we are going to measure it to have an aggregate and indicate in what you call an integrated measure of intellectual capital. Right. Now, finally, what we are going to discuss is that how these measures have been used by organizations, okay? And then we will take up as example to show you that how we are going to measure the intellectual capital for the organization. Right. So, we start with some of the statements that is actually about Indian organizations, that how Indian organizations are going to do this. I mean, if you look at the disclosures, intellectual capital reporting by Indian firms, I could get some information through various sources. And if you look at the kind of disclosures that have been made by Indian companies, it is not very encouraging in the sense that very few companies are using them first. Second, very few measures have been reported so far. So, it is not an exhaustive an integrated measure of intellectual capital by the Indian firms. So, what the survey suggests, if you look at some of the points that is made, first major point that have been made after the research about the Indian companies and their disclosure of intellectual capital is that there is a limited disclosure of intellectual capital related items. You remember in the previous lecture I talked about a number of intellectual capital items, around 45-50 items, which could be part of intellectual capital belonging to different forms of capital. Right. Now, what Indian companies are doing, that they are using only few of them. So, and there is a limited disclosure, it means that they are not disclosing information related to their intellectual capital related to especially intangible and invisible assets. For tangible assets, they have balance sheet which is reflecting the capability of the firm in terms of their book value. Right. And second part, which is more important, is that whatever intellectual capital disclosure information that is being provided by Indian companies is based on voluntary disclosures. What do you mean by voluntary disclosures? That it is for the organizations for them to provide this kind of information as a part of their annual reporting or as a part of their balance sheets. Right. Now, few companies voluntarily have decided to include some of the measures of intellectual capital as a part of their annual reports and the balance sheets. Right. While if you look at the book value, most of the companies do provide information about the assets and liabilities in their balance sheets, right, which is mandatory by the government also. Right. So, all companies have to when they are going to submit their annual reports, they have to see what is the assets and their liabilities and these kind of things. But since it is a new development that is happening in terms of measuring the value of intellectual capital of an organization, in an aggregate and a holistic way to see that how as an organization you are performing and moving ahead or not, okay, in terms of your capital base or capital index. The state of affairs in Indian companies is not very encouraging. That is what I wanted to tell you, okay, because neither they are disclosing very few items. Okay. The information is very limited and it is on a voluntary basis. Right. So, very few Indian companies which are very progressive in nature are going for these kind of things. Moving to the second part, most cases you will find that the kind of intangible assets that is being reported in financial statements, it is basically related to their intellectual capital. Okay. It basically relates to their intellectual property like trademarks, patents and goodwill. So, goodwill is one thing that is being used and has been used since long, but in addition to that only few measures of intellectual property, which shows basically the nature of the intellectual property like patents, trademarks, okay, and these kind of things have been reflected in their financial statements. Okay. Beyond that, they have not gone for anything else which could be a part of what you call intellectual capital reporting of the organization. Now, if you look at the relationship between the tangible assets, okay, and intangible assets that we have been talking about. If you look at the state of affairs in Indian companies, okay, when they are going to show their book value, okay, tangible assets, actually they did not explain the gap, what is the gap between the market value or the book value of the firm. The book value may be say x, but the market value may not be x, it could be y also. So, there could be a difference between the book value of a company or the market value of a company. Okay. And most of the disclosures do not show this, that what is the gap between whether the book value or the market value are same or not, and what is the, they were not showing when what is the market value of the firm, okay, except few disclosures that they make related to intellectual property. So, in a nutshell, if you look at the state of affairs for the Indian firms, this is the data, but this is not so discouraging, because now more and more companies coming forward, and there are many companies which are doing well so far as intellectual capital management is concerned. Now, this is a database of Nifty 550 firms. Okay. Nifty is basically an index of stock, okay. And some companies that you see here, which include basically the top 10 companies, basically database is around 10 years old, 2004 or 2005, and this shows some of the companies and the number of intellectual capital items that they are disclosing in their reporting. Okay. So, if look at these companies like Infosys, Tata Consultancy Services, ITC, ICICI Bank, Bharti Airtel, Reliance, Wipro, Dr. Reddy's Lab, BHEL, Tech Mahindra. So, these are the companies which have been in the forefront of, you can say, of intellectual capital reporting disclosures. But if you look at the number of items that they are disclosing is very negligible, like for example, it is not even in 2 digits. Say Infosys, the maximum number of items that they are disclosing is 9 only, like TCS is 8, then ITC is 6, and then if you come down to the list, you will find that BHEL and Reddy's Lab and even Reliance, which are at the forefront of the you can say this kind of reporting, are reporting only 4 to 5 items. And there are number of companies which do even reporting less than that. Now, if you look at this, you will find that most of these disclosures are very less. For example, if you see that intellectual capital disclosures of other companies, like which are good companies, okay, which have a brand value and other kind of things like L&T, SBI, Gas Authority, Indus Bank, Tata Motors, Tata Steel, PNB, Tata Power, Lupin, Hero, Sun, ACC, Hindalco, Grasim, NTPC, Mahindra and Mahindra. Now, if you look at the list of companies, you will find that they are India's top companies. They could be belonging to services, they could be belonging to say oil sector, they could be belonging to IT companies, they could be also manufacturing, okay, even banking also. Okay. So, you will find that there is a diverse set of companies which have started the process of intellectual capital disclosure. But the only problem with this kind of disclosure is that the number of items that they are disclosing or the number of intellectual capital items which they are disclosing is very less. Okay. You can send 4, 4, 3, 3, 2, 2, something like that, which is not very encouraging. Maybe in the future that these companies would opt for more and more disclosure, and they would include more and more number of items, so far as disclosure of intellectual capital is concerned. Now, two things that we have seen, that what is the state of affairs of intellectual capital so far as Indian companies are concerned, and similarly we have also seen that what is the number of intellectual capital item that is being disclosed by top companies. So, these are the top 25, 26 companies of the Nifty 50 firm that I have included. So, I have not given the data about other companies. Now, this another way to look at it, right. So, what are they disclosing? If you look, these are basically related to that items of intellectual capital. Okay. Now, if you look at the intellectual capital items, that if you look at the top 4 things that is being reported by most of the companies, okay, is intellectual property, human capital, their productivity and their skills. Somehow that is being quantified, right. So, the total number of disclosures that have been made by the companies related to intellectual property is 24. Only 22 companies report about human capital, 11 about the productivity and 10 about the skills. and the list goes down. Okay. It means the number of companies that have been made disclosures related to various items. Now, what we are trying to say here is that if you look at the content wise, it means what they are disclosing, okay, you will find that most of them could be quantified except 1 or 2 that is being reported, other things are not being reported like culture. Now, culture is being reported by only 5 companies. Okay. Diversity is reported by 3 companies. How organizations learn, only 3 companies, right. Intellectual capital 3, assets, management quality, only 1 company is disclosing it. It means that one suggestion that can be given, or it has implications for organizations, that they should try to disclose as many items of intellectual capital as possible, because if you are not going to include as many items for intellectual capital, then what will happen, that you will not be able to create a good index for your intellectual capital. Okay. And that is going to affect your market value of the firm as such, because the value of firm include both the book value as well as market value. So, book value is everybody is reporting, but when it comes to market value, not many of them reporting. So, now the idea is that to encourage these companies to go and disclose as many items as possible, so that when they talk about intellectual capital index or the market value of a company or the value of a firm, they are in a better position to do it. Okay. So, this is the database, especially I have tried to look at another research which was done by Paramasiva and Puthuswamy in 2013. What he did basically, he looked into the annual reports of various companies, okay. Especially probably he looked into more than 100 companies, more than that. Now, and then he sees that how many intellectual IC reporting is done by the Indian companies in the annual reports, right, which could be related to different form of capital, right. Now, if you look at a human capital, there is no reporting about the employees, number is being reported, number of companies that report about the number, gender, professional qualification. It means the employee database is reported by some companies, right, related to the professional qualification, experience, compensation, training, development activities, knowledge and skill, internal spread, right, and accounting also. Okay. And if you look at it by percent of disclosure, you will know that the most of them are good in reporting the strength, employee strength, okay, or what is the knowledge and skill base, how much compensation they are providing, how much they are spending on training and development, and these kind of things, right. Beyond that, there is not much reporting on it, especially the first component of intellectual capital, that is what you call human capital. Moving to the second part, that is actually the external capital, that is related to customer and these kind of things. You will find that the number of companies that is reporting out of 163, you will find that most of them report about the brand, okay. Not many of them are talking about the valuation, okay. Most of them talk about the market information or distribution network or the kind of collaborations that they have made, and some of them are also talking about the customer satisfaction and information, okay, and the kind of social activities. Okay. Now, you will find that most of the companies are talking about social activities. It means that they how much they are spending on CSR activities, that is being reported by most of the companies. Okay. And if you look at it in terms of percentage, 28% companies are reporting about their social activities. I mean, how in what way they are contributing to social activities in terms of CSR activities and other things that they are doing for the society, right. Now, apart from this internal external, if you look at the internal capital, right, in terms of organizational and infrastructural capital. Okay. Now, out of 98 companies data that was there with them, they could find that most of them are reporting about how much they are going to spend on R&D activities, right. Then developing an IT system, structure, then culture, and then patents and copyrights and trademarks, right. So, that is how different kind of say what you call infrastructural or organizational related capital in terms of the intellectual property is being reported or being disclosed by the companies. Okay. Now, what does this data suggest? Now, we have seen information about the number of items that is being disclosed, how many items each companies are disclosing out, especially out of the Nifty 500, or if you look at this research which says that okay, how many components of intellectual capital are being reported by how many companies, you will find that this is not very encouraging, though they are trying to include more and more items in the process, but still it is in a very infancy stage when it comes to intellectual capital reporting in their annual reports. Now, what I am going to do further is that I am going to take an example that if you have to create an intellectual capital index of a bank, right, we are going to follow the same process that we had discussed earlier. Now, if you look at this is not an exhaustive list, but here I have taken an example and I am going to use the same slide again here. Now, you remember that when we were talking about understanding the value of a firm, we try to include both the book value as well as the market value, right. Now, this is going to be done suppose for example, for a bank. So, what we need to do is we need to see book value is not a problem. So, what we are going to do is that we are going to create the market value of a company. Suppose it is a bank. Okay. So, what could be the various type of intellectual capital I see for a bank, which is to be classified into 3 different categories, that is say first is human capital. So, you remember human capital includes number of indicators. Okay. So, if you look at human capital indicators, which include knowledge, experience, skill and these kind of things, the competencies which form the human capital. So, you need to create, once you know that okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 these are the different indicators. Okay. So, first stage what you are going to do, identify the human capital indicators of the bank. Okay. Right. So, you take certain indicators and say for example, competency could be one indicator, okay. Their innovation ability could be another indicator, right. Motivation could be another indicator, professional experience there could be, the professional level could be another indicator, right. Experience of the average experience of the employee could be another indicator. So, you are going to take a number of indicators of human capital, right. Now, once you have these human capital indicators, okay, and it is identified by you for a bank, and you must see that it is relevant, okay, in the context of a banking system, because that is very very important. Okay. Once you have identified these human capital indicators, what is your next task? You are going to measure it. So, how you are going to measure these indicators? Competency, innovating abilities, motivation, how we are going to measure the level of motivation of employee, what is the professional level, what is the experience of the employees. Okay. So, you are going to create indicator for these things, it could be in terms of percentage, it could be in terms of quantity or whatever it is, okay, or level whatever it is. So, you are going to use certain measures either quantitative or qualitative to measure these indicators. Now, if you look at this here, now look at the figure, the first which shows that these are the 3 indicators, right, like innovating ability, employee motivation and competencies, correct. So, these are the human capital indicators in the context of a bank. So, how are we going to measure the competency, okay, in terms of their knowledge and skill, then you have to quantify it. In terms of their innovative ability, what is the level of how innovative they are. So, you are giving a rating scale. Motivation is to be made using a rating scale, okay. On a 5-point scale we are going to say it. What is the proficiency level, what is the average professional experience that people have. So, we are going to use average, okay. Experience we are going to use average, right, of all the employees that you have, and that will give you an idea about your human capital indicators in the organization, right. And once you have done this, the next stage you are going to quantify it in monetary terms, right. So, apart from human capital indicators, you also have second stage Second type of indicator which is known as structural capital. Right. And when we are talking about structural capital, you could take number of things like, I am giving some example like employee care, second technology, process, quality, right, process quality and technology quality. In the context of banking, it is very important because everything depends upon the relationship, whether employee care the customers or not, what is that technology that you are using to process various activities, what is your product technology, okay, what kind of software and other things that you are using for transaction and different kind of activities. So, they become important. Now, this again has to be quantified, this is to measured, and at the next level you are going to quantify them, right. So, if you look at the figure, it shows this one employee care, product technology and process quality. So, these are some of the measures which are relevant in the bank. So, these are the indicators you have to identify how you are going to measure it, and at the then you are going to quantify it in monetary terms, just like you have done it for human capital. Moving next, you have relational capital. Third, that is relational capital. Here again you are going to use certain indicators like customer loyalty, commitment, okay, intensity of the relationship with the customer. Okay. So, you can take a lot of measures and then make sure that it is relevant in the context of the bank. Then how are you going to measure these customer quality, commitment, and then you are using certain rating scales, okay, and then you are going to quantify it, right. And how are you going to do it? It could be in terms of percentage, and the average can be taken, or you can quantify if it is possible. Okay. Now, if you look at this, once we have identified this, what we are going to do here is, as I told you that you need to identify them are using certain indicators. Okay. So, here if you look at the indicators that has been used to measure them, for example, for human capital indicators, competency indicators is, okay, how many of them participate in online training activity in terms of percentage, participating in training activities, training per hours per person, right. So, this we give you an idea, and then you can quantify, and then once you identify these indicators in these percentage terms, what next you are going to do is that calculate the monetary value, right. Look at some other indicators like innovating abilities, what is the average age of the employees, okay, what is the composition of the employees in terms of men and women, okay, how many of them are having professional qualification are graduated. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the other indicators like motivation, okay, look at the seniority, people with flexible salary, how many have been able to advance in their career. So, you are going to use certain measures, as I told you, which will give you an idea about the human capital of the organization. Now, the next stage what you are going to do, once you have identified these indicators in terms of percentage, quantify them into monetary terms, right. Similarly, if you look at the structural capital indicators, right, number of internet portals you have, number of internet forums, number of information transaction per month. Okay. So, you have got data in different using different indicators, because this is the minutes, this is the absolute numbers, right. What you are going to do is that you need to find out how you are going to transform them into monetary form, that is very important. Okay. So, similarly, for example, technology and process quality, number of computers per person, number of internet pages visited by the customers per month, number of internet pages visited per month, right. So, this will give you an idea about your structural capital, right. Similarly, if you look at the third one, that is product technology, what is the number of product and services that you are using, how many new products were released in the market. Okay. Because if as a bank you have to be to offer product and services depending upon the requirement of the customers. So, these are the important things. The idea here is that you identify various capitals, related to intellectual capital, and the various form of intellectual capital may be human capital, relationship capital or structural capital. Identify the indicators, measure these indicators in whatever it is possible using whatever units you want in terms of percentage, monetary terms or whatever rating scales if it is possible, and then finally, we are going to quantify, right. Now, if you look at relationship capital and their indicators like customer loyalty, average duration of customers relationship, what is that? Number of complaints that you are going to have within a given time frame, and that is how we are going to measure customer loyalty. Similarly, if you look at relationship intensity, and if you look at relationship intensity says the number of satisfied customers by phone banking, number of internet customers that you have, number of banking transactions that happens by bank through phone. Okay. So, this will give you an idea about the intensity of the relationship with the customer in the context of a bank, right. Similarly, if you look at finally, intellectual capital management, I am going to give you a quote here, because what we have discussed basically is that what is more important for an organization, is it book value or a market value? What is more important for a market? It is tangible assets or intangible and invisible assets, right. Now, the question that is being asked is that when you go for intellectual capital management as such, you have to see that you are not going to look at only the book value of a company. Okay. It means that you are not going to look at the physical assets than the financial assets of a company. You also look at certain soft measures which are more important. Okay. For example, you are going to look at their intangible assets and invisible assets in the form of human capital in terms of the competencies, relationship aspects both related to customers in the society, social aspects. Also look at the kind of intellectual property that you have created, because if you are not able to utilize these soft measures, probably will not be in a better position to create a good index of intellectual capital in your organization. So, when it comes to measuring and managing intellectual capital in organization, with the changes that is happening, okay, it is happening in the realm of these intangible assets, not in the realm of what you call physical assets, right. So, what needs to be done, that if you want to do things traditionally and only measure your say index through book value, probably you will not be able to move ahead and transform yours as an organization. What is more important, that if you want to stay relevant, want to be competitive, then you need to focus more on market value, right. So, I am not saying that you do not go for the hard measures, you do look at it, because it gives you an idea about the strength of the company, but at the same time you must also look at some of the soft issues like relationship and other things, which are equally important for an organization to create a better market value for themselves. Because you know that today people are not driven by the book value. The book value may be less for an organization, but if the market value of an organization is good, people will go for these kind of companies, people will invest in these kind of companies. Okay. And that is why measuring and managing intellectual capital of an organization and creating an index is good, and many Indian organizations have started for these kind of things. Slowly they are responding to this kind of activities and trying to include as many items as possible for reporting, so that they are able to create an aggregate value and integrated measure of the intellectual capital as such, right. And here HR professionals have very important role, not only identifying the various forms of capital, but also plan interventions to improve them and see that how it can be measured, especially when it comes to measuring the qualitative form of various capitals, and that is where HRD professionals have to see that how they can provide their expertise in the process to ensure that these things are measured, so that organization is able to create a better index of their firm, and which will basically reflect the value of the firm as such, including both the market value as well as the book value. Thank you very much.